iHeartRadio info.
Standard data and message rates apply in this nationwide contest.
That's Wings to 200-200. This is the Ross Kaminsky Show. Now, Ross Kaminsky on Denver's talk station, 630 KHOW.
Can I just stick with this NRA story for a minute? Because it's really kind of nuts. This is a big organization, a big organization that is very much in the public eye, and its supporters, most of its supporters really love it, and most of its detractors really hate it, and it's very important on the Republican side of politics, and President Trump closely aligned with the National Rifle Association. Let me just share with you this crazy letter by Wayne LaPierre, who is the NRA's, his title is Executive Vice President, but basically he runs the show at the NRA and has been the highest ranking face of the NRA for a long time. Let me share this with you. This is nuts. Dear members of the board, and by the way, the NRA board is meeting today to talk about a lot of this stuff, okay? Dear members of the board, leaders in every walk of life must often choose between what is true and what is polite, between what is convenient and what is right. I believe each of you made that choice when you joined the NRA board. Despite a political climate that maligns our founding freedoms, you elected to walk the principled path and not the popular one. Yesterday evening, and let's see, this came out late Thursday, okay? But the letter was only made public more recently. Yesterday evening, I was forced to confront one of those defining choices, styled in the parlance of extortionists as an offer I couldn't refuse. I refused it. Delivered by a member of our board on behalf of his employer, the exhortation was simple: resign or there will be destructive allegations made against me and the NRA. Alarmed and disgusted, I refused the offer. This letter explains why. As you know, the NRA has, over this past year, taken steps to strengthen its efforts to document and verify compliance by our vendors with our purchasing practices and their contracts. As stated in a pending lawsuit, we've met extraordinary resistance from one vendor called Ackerman McQueen. And he uses the initials AM for the rest of the note. As most of you know, I've been a proponent of AM in the past because they're capable of doing high-quality work, but as I discovered, AM is capable of doing something much different. Yesterday, at approximately 2:59 p.m. Eastern Time, Colonel North, who is the NRA president now, Colonel Oliver North, placed a telephone call to Millie Hallow, one of my most senior staff members. Millie returned the call and took notes, the substance of which appears below. Let me just pause here for a second. It's not often you get an insight into this kind of crazy, hyper-political, backstabbing soap opera in very, very large organizations. In a way, the closest we've seen in the public eye for a long time has been some of the backstabbing within the Trump administration. People saying this person did that, and this person's a bad person, and this person doesn't support Trump enough, and blah, 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 blah. Right? But you normally, that stuff is kept pretty quiet in large organizations most of the time, at the highest levels of large organizations. Anyway, Colonel North stated that the purpose of the call was to relate the contents of a letter drafted by AM, Ackerman McQueen. In fact, let me just, Ackerman McQueen. I think they are an advertising company. Yeah, they're an advertising agency based in Oklahoma City, founded in 1939. And they've got offices now in Alexandria, Virginia, in Colorado Springs, in Dallas, and Tulsa. They have about 225 employees. And I'm trying to read whether it says, yeah, it looks like 1939. It's been around a long time. All right, let me get back to this letter. This is really quite shocking. So he'd been advised by Dan Boren, who's an employee of Ackerman McQueen's client, that unless I resigned as executive vice president of the association, Ackerman would transmit this allegedly damaging letter to the entire NRA board. According to Colonel North, the letter was, quote, bad, end quote, for me. two other members of my executive team, and the association. I believe the purpose of the letter was to humiliate me, discredit our association, and raise appearances of impropriety that hurt our members and the Second Amendment. The letter would contain a devastating account of our financial status, sexual harassment charges against a staff member, accusations of wardrobe expenses, and excessive staff travel expenses. Now, this part's in bold in the letter. This thing is so crazy. But then Colonel North explained that the letter would not be sent if I were to promptly resign as your executive vice president, and if I supported Colonel North's continued tenure as president. He stated that he could, quote, negotiate an excellent retirement, end quote, for me. After Colonel North concluded his telephone call with Milley, others informed me that I needed to withdraw the NRA lawsuit against AM or be smeared. Wow. By the way, you may recall a little while back when the NRA was just being attacked by absolutely everybody for standing up for the Second Amendment. And I actually joined the NRA for a year at that time, as many people did, even though I had never been a member in the past. Not to support Oliver North, just to support the Second Amendment. Anyway, I think my membership may have lapsed since that time. I'm not sure. After Colonel North concluded his telephone call with Milley, again, listen carefully to this. Others informed me that I needed to withdraw the NRA lawsuit against this firm, Ackerman McQueen, or be smeared. Sure does sound like extortion, doesn't it? I continue with Wayne LaPierre's letter. In my almost 40-year relationship with AM, never, not once, did the agency make these allegations against me or the NRA. They are conveniently making them now only as they face scrutiny in a Virginia court and the prospect of having to comply with our demand for books and records. Some of these items involve accounting and record keeping for related party transactions, a suite of issues to which the NRA has devoted extensive attention in the past year. This is a subject about which our outside counsel has presented to the board and which I take seriously. Of course, this is why transparent access to Ackerman's records is so important. I hope that whatever else comes of these events, the NRA will finally have full access to the information we are entitled to. All of this is painful for me. I will not judge Colonel North, but must report what many of you already know. He has contractual and financial loyalties to Ackerman McQueen. Last year, he entered into an employment agreement with the agency that pays him millions of dollars annually, supposedly in exchange for hosting an NRA TV documentary series called American Heroes. Ackerman bargained to deliver 12 feature-length episodes of American Heroes within the series' first year. That period expires next month, and AM has delivered only 3 episodes. The latest is only 11 minutes in length. The NRA wrote a recent letter demanding to know what exactly it is paying for and what it is getting in light of these production shortfalls. AM did not respond directly, but appears to have responded indirectly by trying to oust me. Ultimately, this letter is not about AM or about Colonel North or Dan Boren. This is about you and me. When I became your executive vice president, I took an oath to defend the freedoms for which the NRA stands against all adversaries and threats. It is regrettable that threats now emanate from our fiduciaries and friends. But so long as I have your confidence, an honor that humbles me daily, I will not back down. Serving this association has been the greatest honor of my life and not one I'm willing to forfeit in exchange for a backroom retirement deal. I believe our board and devoted members will see this for what it is, a threat meant to intimidate and divide us. I choose to stand and fight and hope to bring 5 million members with me. Sincerely, Wayne LaPierre, NRA Executive Vice President. I hadn't actually intended to read you that whole thing, but it's not that long, and frankly, it's kind of incredible. And if I could try to summarize in plain English here, what it sounds like he's saying is that the NRA is suing an advertising agency who has a contract with the president of the NRA that pays him a lot of money for hosting a TV show that isn't actually even being produced on schedule. When the NRA went after the advertising agency Oliver North appears now to be cooperating with the advertising agency in threatening to smear the executive vice president, the head of the NRA, the guy who's really the head of the NRA, and threaten him with outing some kind of information either about him or someone else at the NRA or some other thing about the NRA. It does sound like extortion, and it does sound like Oliver North went along with it. And of course, Wayne LaPierre is going to say what he needs to say to defend himself. We haven't heard Oliver North's side of the story, so I don't want to go too far down the road of accepting just one side, but I think it's easily provable that the NRA has, filed a lawsuit against this firm, and now this firm working through Oliver North is threatening Wayne LaPierre. The story is really crazy. I think that what Wayne LaPierre did in response, it actually separate from any question of whether he's doing everything right or not. I have no idea, and I don't really care. I think his approach, his response was the right one, which is to say that he got up and told the entire board at least the overall theme of the threatening letters. And I think that's the right thing to do. And that way, he really puts North and this other firm in a really bad place. If they still come out with this stuff, it is really going to look like potentially criminal extortion. And then they will be facing not just a court case about books and records and are you doing the right thing, but they may be facing an aggressive criminal prosecution. It's very smart of Wayne LaPierre to come out the way that he did. All right, I want to take a few minutes here to talk about what happened at the Chabad synagogue in Poway, California this weekend. Namely, a lunatic neo-Nazi, whose name I will not use, who posted a letter online proclaiming pride in, and I quote, that he inherited the blood of very wealthy Yankees, intelligent, resourceful, and uncompromising, and on the other side of his family, inherited the blood, I'm still quoting, of poor Southern farmers, intelligent, musically gifted, and self-sufficient. He goes on to talk about how, quoting, I am blessed by God for such a magnificent bloodline. Now, I'm absolutely fine if you want to talk about a magnificent bloodline in a horse that you own or a dog that you own. Even a canary that you own, it's fine with me. But please don't come talking to me about magnificent bloodlines in people. Especially a guy like this who talks about it as a really long-term thing, right? It's one thing to say, my parents were both 153 IQ, and so therefore I inherited some genetics from them that makes me at least more likely than others to be more intelligent than average. It's another thing entirely to say that you claim some kind of overall characteristic, some kind of traits of one of the original colonists of Roanoke, as this guy does. Traits from hundreds of years ago that somehow make you intelligent or resourceful or, for crying out loud, musically gifted because someone in your ancestry was. And by the way, how does this guy know that has he just been watching like a Ken Burns Civil War documentary and thinking that the music that Ken Burns plays over the people, the Civil War soldiers writing their letters meant that the poor Southern farmers were musically gifted? Now, he talks directly in this letter that was posted online about why he believes, and I'm quoting, that killing Jews helps the European race. There's probably, I'm going to assume that within the people listening to me right now, I'm going to assume that there are 0 people who agree with that. In fact, I'm going to assume that there are 0 people who believe that there is such a thing as a, quote, European race. Obviously, there isn't. There is a Caucasian race, and most Western Europeans come through that, right? Just as there are other races that tend to dominate in Eastern Asia and in Africa, but there is not a European race. The other thing that's kind of odd, and I realize that some people, including some Jews in a way, think of Jews as a race, even though that isn't really right. There are Jews of all races. Nevertheless, the idea of a European race, the idea that it exists is ridiculous. The idea that whatever he's talking about is under threat from Jews is ridiculous. And yet, this guy writes this letter. Now, I want to say, I think he wrote it right around the time, posted it around the time he was going to do this thing. I don't think he posted it way in advance. But in any case, when somebody saw this, even if this is being posted in a place where a lot of people agree with him, which says a lot about the United States of America, that there's like more than 3 people in the whole country who believe this stuff, you would think that somebody would talk to law enforcement about him. Because it's not just that he's saying something like, I hate Jews, or Jews have too much money, or the usual stuff that moron anti-Semites say. He said that killing Jews helps him, and that he intended to do this. Again, I think he posted it shortly before he did the act, and I don't know that anyone would have had time to respond to the letter, but I am also very, very frightened that most of the people on this website who read the letter would have chosen not to respond. We'll be right back.
This report is sponsored by